Hello, everyone, and welcome to Press Coverage, part of the Going for Two Live network. I'm your host, Kyle Senra, and joining me is Geoff Lambert, the, editor in chief, but more importantly, founder of said Going for Two network and goingfor2.com. Geoff, welcome aboard Press Coverage.
What's up, Kyle? It's weird to be sort of on my own network as the guest. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, I guess as much as there's so many great shows on the network, you haven't really made the rounds of them. So always so busy with the Armchair Show and the Personal League podcasts that we do that aren't on the live network. But of course, it's glad to have those done to your personal league. So to get in touch with any of us involved. But for usually the person to get in touch to for those is Geoff here at Geoff Lambert 77 for those who can see on the screen. But yeah. Here we are. It's I think it is the final press coverage of the season because the season is coming, the NFL season. You hear excitement. I'm sure you're super excited, Geoff.
Can't wait. It's the best time of year.
Does it bring you back to when you're a kid, like just the excitement of an NFL season, almost like Christmas every year?
Yeah, and it's weird because it's a different kind of excitement. When you're a kid, you're rooting for your team, your whatever your team may be. Obviously, I'm a 49ers fan, so I'm rooting for my team and following all the notes. But now that we're into fantasy, I mean, I'm rooting for, especially in Dynasty, I'm rooting for my rookies that I've been, that I've drafted, guys that I've invested in, or even guys that I've drafted last year that may have not gotten the opportunity yet, that I'm hoping to get the opportunity this year. So it's like a new kind of excitement, almost like being a player where you're kind of like, see what these new guys can do, and it adds a different element to football in general.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's not you can say you're not your father's game. We can all say not our grandfather's game, or the game of football evolves so much. But let's take it back to those first moments. How did you first get into football and really sports in general?
So I can actually remember the exact game that I became a football fan. I had watched Super Bowls before this one, and I'd watched football before this one as well. But this game is the one that stands out, the one I became a fan of the 49ers, the one I became a fan of football. And it was the 89 Super Bowl between the Bengals and the 49ers. And it was the only Super Bowl around that era that I can remember, at least, that was close. A lot of them back then day were blowouts, 55-10, or this one was a close game. This one came down to Joe Montana, 92-yard drive down the field, throwing a touchdown to John Taylor to win it. Jerry Rice became my favorite player in that game because he had, I think, 11 catches for 212 or 215 yards, which is still a record in the NFL that still stands. And it became known. I saw a story later on in life about that game, and it became known as the John Candy game. I don't know if you heard the story, but so 92-yard drive to win the game, they're in the huddle, and there was like a rookie or a second-year offensive lineman that all season had been kind of starstruck by all the players and stuff and the fans, and he'd always want to get autographs from some of the celebrities that would come out to the games. So here it is, Super Bowl, the biggest moment of your life, and, this guy's in the huddle, and Joe Montana, being the Joe Cool that he is, looks up into the stands and goes, "Hey, look, it's John Candy," and then drives down the field and scores a touchdown to win the game. So it's a really cool story that I had some backstory on. A moment in my life that I remember, and then getting the backstory of that. I think it was on NFL Films or something that they had that whole story. Made it even cooler because that that was kind of my idol. Joe Montana, Jerry Rice growing up were kind of my what made me a football fan, really.
Well, as a Canadian, I like to make jokes and stuff. I could say John Candy's an idol. What a legend there, really. Joe Montana to John Candy, one legend looking at another.
Right.
Legendary game, really, because I feel like I've watched like specials, top 10 Super Bowls, and like that one seems to always make the list. I think it's like the epitome, like you said, of Joe Cool, right? Oh, we got to go 92 yards to if we don't score a touchdown here, we lose the Super Bowl, and sure enough, they win it. It's no fear of losing, right? You just go and win.
Just go down the field and it was awesome. And like I said, it was the one Super Bowl that I can remember back then that was close. Came down into the fourth quarter. I think I was 10 or 11 years old, up way past my bedtime, and watching this game and hanging on every single moment of this game, and watching them win was just like, that was it. That made me a fan right then and there.
And Bo, I guess a fan here. Thanks, Bo, member of the Going for Two network and all.
What's up?
saying "Heyo." So yeah, let me count. I think that's 5 O's in the "Heyo" message. So like one for each of the 49ers Super Bowl rings. So I guess already some respect there for the for the team. And I think just to concentrate on that Super Bowl a little more because we can. I feel like Bengals were like they were a good team back then. Like I believe the two of the Super Bowl wins for the 49ers were against the Bengals. And
Yep.
if I remember correctly, Boomer Esiason, and maybe he's awful as a commentator or whatever, but as a quarterback was pretty good. I think he won the MVP. I know at some point in his career, I think it might have been even that season. So
Yep.
they did it against really good competition.
Yeah, no, it's funny to look at the Bengals now and look at them back then, and you think that they were really a good team because they were. I think it was the '82 Super Bowl that they were also in against the 49ers, and they were, a good team back then. And, nowadays that's not what you equate with a good team as being a Bengals.
Oh no, exactly. I think there's an offensive tackle I think on that team too, Munoz, who's like considered one of the greatest tackles ever. I think he's on a bunch of all-decade teams, probably the all-100 team too. So yeah, beat a good Bengals team. Yeah, so reminisce. So happy for the Bengals fans here, talking about their great team, even though it doesn't talk about a Super Bowl win, but it's good. That's about as good moments you can get for Bengals fans. And I think maybe Bengals fans might be included for this. I've heard a lot of people talk about this. I've heard this from Dolphins fans after the Marino era. Oh, the Dolphins suck so much that I just got into fantasy because it gave me something to cheer for. So I guess with the 49ers being so good, I don't know if that's your story, but how did you make that jump into fantasy, Geoff?
So I've always been a stat nerd, even well before fantasy football. I was the kid that used to bring the newspaper to school in the morning, and I would literally read the sports page on Tuesday because it had all the league leaders, who's winning, who has the most touchdowns, who has the most yards. I knew all the best defenses. I knew all that stuff for no reason at all back then because there wasn't fantasy football. I just liked to know it just in case it came up in conversation or whatever. I always knew like, oh yeah, so and so is the best defense in the league, and so has the most sacks, and I would just, I just knew stats. So in 1998 ish, somewhere in that range, Yahoo's first fantasy football season, I guess. A friend of mine asked about joining it. I had no idea what fantasy football was at that point. I think people were playing before that, with the pen and paper. I wasn't one of those guys. Never even heard of it until this time. So I joined just, what the hell? It's football. I like football. It sounds like something that would be up my alley. So we played, actually, it was an IDP league, ironically, because I don't like IDP leagues now. But back then it wasn't IDP. It was PPR. So I've actually never played in a standard league ever. I started off as PPR. And I won the first 2 years. So, I mean, kind of made me a fan after that. Back then we weren't playing for money. I think I was just fresh out of high school, and it was just for fun at that time. Won the first 2 years. Ended up the first 2 years I wasn't the commissioner. The third year, the guy that was commissioner kind of stepped down. I took over the commissioner of that same league, and that league is still going to this day. It has since been turned into a dynasty league. But yeah, same basic group of guys. A few of them have kind of dropped out over the years. They had families and they couldn't do it anymore. But for the most part, same group of guys. I've been playing for whatever it is, 22, 23 years, whatever it is. So it's been going strong, and it's a good group of guys too. So it's fun.
Consistent core keeps competition current.
Definitely.
There's probably another C word that's better, but I'll keep it cool there.
There's some long-term rivalries in that league. There's one guy that refuses to trade with me no matter what. No matter how good the trade is, he just will not trade with me because I ripped him off once, and he won't ever forgive me for it.
I mean, it makes sense to get like, oh, I've won this league twice. I can't let it fold. Like everyone's got to remember that I was the first champion here. So, yeah, kind of like the Packers did that first 2 Super Bowls. It's Lombardi. The name's on there. So yeah.
Yep. There you go.
So how long did it take before, playing fantasy before you said, I want to help others with fantasy, not just those in my inner circle, but really like get the information out to the masses and really create content about fantasy football?
So I kind of fell into that. It wasn't something that I sat down and go, you know what? I think I want to do this. I want to create content. I want to, I wasn't even on Twitter. I didn't know any of the Twitter personalities that were even on Twitter back then. Basically I was the stat nerd. I was the one that knew all this stuff. At this point, I had won, I think 6 of the championships, the 2 that I won in the beginning, then 4 more after that. So I was the guy everybody kind of went to ask questions about waiver wire, about, who they're sitting, who they're starting that week. And I happened to give a good piece of advice to a friend of mine I worked with. And I can't remember exactly who it was. I want to say it was the year that Devontae Freeman was the number one running back overall. I told him to pick him up, I think after week 2 or 3, whatever week that it was that Tevin Coleman went down. And, obviously he became the number one running back that year. It was a big year for him. So he thanked me like, hey, that was great. He's like, you should do like a podcast or go write some stuff. And I was kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll do that. And I literally had no idea what I was doing. I went to Google and was like, how to start a blog, basically, is what I typed into Google. I found a website that took me step by step on how to start it. It even like told me where to go to get my hosting service, and I set it up. And honestly, when I first started, I thought that I would just be like begging my friends and family to go to my site, like, please go there and read my stuff that I wrote. And I didn't think I'd get that many views. Ironically, I started it after the Super Bowl, so there's no content really at that time. I was still redraft. I didn't know what to write about, and I had just gotten into DFS, so I was writing DFS NBA stuff. Ironically, so if you go back all the way to the end of all of our content, you're going to see NBA DFS content was the first content on goingfor2.com. And back then, DFS wasn't that big, so finding content was not easy. So my site happened to be one of the few that were offering NBA content, and all of a sudden, I'm getting 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hits a day, and I was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of fun. People that I don't even know are reading my stuff. It's kind of awesome. So I did the whole NBA season, and then come in the summertime, I don't do baseball. I don't like baseball. I don't follow baseball. So I was kind of like, all right, well, is my site going to go dormant for a whole 3 months before the season starts? What am I going to do? So I put out a little tweet. I was kind of like, hey, does anybody want to write MLB stuff, DFS stuff for the off season? 2 guys stepped up and wrote, MLB DFS for that whole summer for me. I would just do a little bit of editing here and there. One of them is still with goingfor2.com, Brad. He's got like 500 articles posted on there or something crazy. But he's still with us, and he wrote MLB for me that summer, and he's continued to write for me. And that's where it started. After I said, okay, people are actually interested in this and they want to write. I'm going to put out, more tweets and see if I can get more people covering content for the NFL season. For DFS, I kind of kept expanding it. The following year, I think it was 2016, is when I started the first podcast. It wasn't anything like it is today. Kind of a cool story. I don't know if it's a cool story, but it's an interesting story on how I kind of fell into podcasting, because I never thought I'd do podcasting. Growing up in school, I stuttered. I still to this day struggle with stuttering. So you would think being on a podcast would be the last thing I would want to do. But I got on a podcast, so I'm doing my content, and this guy reaches out to me and say, hey, I want you to come on my podcast. I'd never done one before. It's the first time I'd ever done one. He wanted to talk about the 49ers. So I was like, all right, cool. I'll come on your podcast. We'll do this. So I went on, did the podcast. After the show, he's like, hey, is there any way you can syndicate my podcast on your website? He's like, in exchange for that, I will let you use my hosting service to do a podcast yourself. I was like, all right. So I got on this podcasting network. It was called One Take Podcast. I did a show that was basically me talking. It was quite terrible. I don't want to go back and find those old shows because I don't know what they sounded like, but it was quite terrible. I'm not good doing it by myself. I got to have somebody to talk to. I just can't talk to myself for an hour. It's just not something I can do. But I did that for a little while. And then the tragic part of the whole thing, the guy that, brought me on, his name was B Meeks. One day he just went dormant. Like, we couldn't find him on Twitter. We couldn't find him on Facebook. I hadn't heard from him in a while. It turns out he had a brain aneurysm and he died. It's a really sad story. We were able to get in touch with his family because there's more than one of us that were on that podcast network. And, we're able to, I think one of the guys actually went to the funeral and all that. And I sent flowers from where I live. And, but then there was no podcasting service. We were kind of like, all right, there's like 4 or 5 guys that were doing it. And now, he's no longer with us. So, what do we do? So one of the guys got with me and was like, hey, you want to start a podcast service with me? We'll split the cost. And we ended up getting a third guy to come in as well. So we split the cost. It was originally called the Talk Loud podcast because there was 3 different separate podcasts. There was my fantasy football one. The other guy did mostly boxing stuff. And the other guy did comic books and movies. He was like entertainment. So it was 3 totally different things. So we couldn't have a fantasy football name. So Talk Loud podcast kind of covered the whole thing. We did that for a couple of years, and then they kind of fell off. The other guy kind of went and did his YouTube thing. Another guy went and got married, and he couldn't do it anymore. So it ended up being just me. So I did that for a while, kind of on and off. And then eventually started bringing on, I think last year we started doing with more than one person on the podcast network, and we've kind of created this whole network now of shows. We have shows literally every day now. So it was kind of, like I said, I didn't really go into it thinking this was going to happen. I just kind of fell into it each step of the way, just kind of, okay, let's do this now. Okay, let's do this now. And before I know it, I have, 40 plus writers and 10 or 12 podcasting hosts. So it's pretty cool.
Now you can almost some nights even just sit back in the armchair instead of hosting the armchair.
Exactly. Funny thing too is so my first show on my network before it became a network was called the Press Coverage Podcast. If you go back onto the Spotify there, I actually had that name as my original podcast name, which is where I came up with it when I changed it. But when I went, because press coverage for me then was just a little bit of everything. I did March Madness, I did DFS NBA. I changed it over to the Armchair Fantasy Show when we just decided to concentrate on fantasy. But then when this whole network came up, I was like, you know what? I'm going to reinvent the Press Coverage Podcast because we already had the SEO built in. We already had, if someone searched press coverage, it was already going to come to my site anyway. So I was like, you know what? Let's just use that name for this podcast.
Well, and I feel blessed that I was the one bestowed the responsibility of that name. That's great. Thank you. So Blue Crew, see your fantasy question. We know Geoff loves to give fantasy advice. We will get to that, but I do want to actually have answer AJ Smithington's question just because it ties into this real well. Podcast or podcast expansion from GF2 brand been cool to see. Keep it up.
AJ's I think just long time fan. He was the first one to coin the forgotten fantasy player. I can't think of his name right now. Who is
Zach Stacy?
Zach Stacy. Yes, he coined the phrase the Zach Stacy Award for the forgotten fantasy player. He's been around for quite a while watching the Going for Two network.
I always remember it's that name because I remember my first time on the show, I gave another Rams running back.
That's right.
Now I can't remember that. Trey something.
Yeah.
Later with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. But yeah, so I always remember, okay, it's the other Rams running back, and of course, not Todd Gurley. I think we still remember him.
Yeah, he's not forgotten quite yet.
Yeah, no one uses that. Actually, someone just used that. What was it, last month? Someone finally used Zach Stacy?
Yep, and I brought it up. I said that was I said AJ calls it the Zach Stacy Award, and someone finally picked Zach Stacy.
Mentioned
Trey
by
Mason.
name.
There we go. Trey Mason, that's the other guy he was talking about.
You see, forgotten players, but AJ doesn't forget anybody. That's it's great. But yeah, so to this fantasy question. So Blue Crew asking thoughts on grabbing Trey Sermon 5th round. So it's half point PPR 12-team league. Says thank you, great show, and I say thank you to that. I appreciate you coming on, watching. And so Geoff, what are your thoughts on that? I know you are a 49ers fan, so it ties into the team.
5th round might be a little rich. I think his value at the end of the season, I think he will be worth a 5th round pick. But I think if you're in a league, I think you could wait another round or two to get him. It'll be a risk if you want Trey Sermon, but I think you can wait a little bit. I do like Trey Sermon. He looked really good yesterday in the preseason game. So did Raheem Mostert, for that matter. So it'll really depend on how Raheem Mostert stays healthy. But I do think Sermon's going to have a big part of this offense. I just think 5th round might be a little too soon. I think you can get another good player in the 5th and maybe get Trey Sermon in the 6th or the 7th round and still be okay with that.
Yeah, I kind of don't like the running backs in that range. I think there's a lot of good wide receivers. So I think it would all depend, not even so much who the other running backs are, because I'm seeing Chase Edmonds, who I'm not a particularly big fan of, Raheem Mostert, maybe Kareem Hunt falls, but outside of that, I don't really love the running backs in that range. So I think the scenario where you'd want to take Sermon is if you haven't taken a running back yet and you feel like this is if Sermon's the best option out of those, I could see that being the argument. But I think if you've got a good enough running back room, I would look at other positions. I think there's a lot of good wide receivers in that range. I know, Geoff, you and I both had some live drafts actually this weekend. In mine was a 14-team league, and I think, if I remember correctly, Sermon was at the 5-6 turn.
Yeah, it really depends on how you draft, because you're right. I go running back heavy. I don't believe in zero RB, which I think is one of your questions later on. I hate to spoil that, but I go running back early, so I'd be looking at getting those receivers in that round, and then potentially coming back and getting Sermon as my RB4, and having him on the bench that it can actually end up being an RB1 eventually.
AJ just coming up with some names: Gaskin, Robinson, and Montgomery. Volume RBs with rookie or manager QBs. Excellent value. Yeah,
Yeah,
if like I feel like those guys are maybe third, if you're lucky, fourth round picks. But yeah, I wouldn't want to test it too much into the fifth round because I don't think any of them will go in that range. I
yeah,
don't particularly love the running backs there. I feel like once you get to the fifth round, it's almost some running backs, maybe even in the ninth round, that kind of possess similar features, similar value. So
agreed.
yeah, that's an excellent point by AJ. And AJ does have a question for us, actually. Colts best value season D, if not streaming. I would say if you're not streaming, there's no value at defense. but I suppose because it seems like the Rams are getting pushed up, and I mean the Bucks coming off that amazing season. So yeah, I do feel like the Colts maybe a little forgotten. DeForest Buckner came around last year and kind of helped the pass rush a little bit, so it could be some good sack numbers too. So yeah, if they're there in the second last, maybe third last round, I suppose that's a value. But anything further than that, I don't think that's much value. But I'm
Yeah,
always streaming defense no matter what too. So that's my skewed perspective.
yeah. I actually had the Colts defense ranked number one overall before the start
Mm.
of last season. No one had the Colts that high. Of course, we had DeForest Buckner, and we traded him. I knew that D line was going to be good. They had good enough pieces on the secondary to be a good defense. I think they ended up number one overall, so that was a little check mark of my box here. My defense this year that I'm actually looking at that people aren't looking at right now is actually the Panthers defense, believe it or not. I think the Panthers can rack up a ton of sacks this year. I think they got a great defensive line. So they're my pick. They're not quite the number one. I'm not going to put up number one like I did the Colts last year, but if I'm looking for a late round defense, if all the good ones are gone, I'm looking at the Panthers.
I think I've got a Panthers player as my number one IDP player just because we love IDP so much, Jeremy Chin. So, yeah, they've got some good talented pieces. AJ's, again, we're talking about this running back range. Mike Davis, only volume back, can think of maybe around that range. So, again, I think back to the Blue Cruise question of the Sermon in the fifth. Yeah, I think, if Mike Davis is there, I would prefer that. I think he's in line for a much more secure workload. So,
Agreed.
again, if Kareem Hunt, Mike Davis, if those guys fall to the fifth, they're worth it, but I don't really like Sermon, Mostert, Edmonds, who I'm conventionally seeing in that fifth, sixth round.
Agreed.
All right, so Geoff, back to the questions. I guess we'll start back up here, but asking if someone's starting out and you could offer one piece of advice to them, and you've started up and built your whole brand, so I think you are a good influence and voice for that. So, what is one piece of advice you can narrow it down to that you'd give to someone?
I think the biggest thing and the biggest mistake I see people coming in when they first start out is just be yourself. Put yourself in your articles. Put your personality in your articles. Everyone comes in and they want to throw out a million stats and they want to sound super smart and sometimes people don't want to read that. It's not interesting. I mean, it's interesting to the point that we like fantasy football and sure stats are great, but put your personality in there. Put jokes in there, just talk to the reader as if you're talking to them in a conversation. I think is a good way to, even in podcasts too, same thing. Put your personality into it. I think it helps you stand out just by the fact that it's you're unique in your own way. So put that into your articles, and then you'll be unique in the field of fantasy, which is very flooded with a lot of content creators. So be yourself and just go that route. I think that's kind of what I've kind of lived by a little bit.
You were talking about just the shows on this network, how it's exploded, but yeah, the scene in general, there's like a lot of rock stars, the scene. Anyway, yeah. Speaking of that, we'll move away from fantasy for a bit. The Yeti coming in, a Yeti sighting, saying hello, fellas.
What's
Good
up,
to see you,
Yeti?
Jared. But yeah, so outside of sports, what are your favorite hobbies, Geoff?
So I used to be, not so much anymore. I do it occasionally, but photography was my big thing. I have a lot of high-end photography equipment. Every Easter, I take my camera and my tripod down to my in-laws, and we do a family portrait with everybody. But yeah, I used to, I live right near DC. I'm about 20 minutes from DC. I used to take what I call my walk-around lens, which is basically a lens that can kind of cover all ranges, and literally walk around DC and just take pictures of. And I didn't go pick pictures of the monuments. I didn't do the tourist thing. I did the more creative stuff. Like I would go to some of the parks where they had like skateboarders, and I would take pictures of skateboarders, doing their tricks off the walls and all that kind of craziness. I'd go take pictures of street performers that were out playing, the guitar or the drums in the street. And I get pictures of them and try to get like, the creative side of DC, not really the tourist side of DC. So yeah, I did that for a while. I played sports growing up. I'm a little bit older now and not quite as in shape as I used to be, but I played basketball pretty much all the way through high school. And I played flag football. I've never actually played football for an organized football team, but I did play flag football. My friends still play flag football every Sunday. I try to go out whenever I can, but unfortunately my job has me working most Sundays, so I don't get to go. But I do play basketball whenever I get a chance. And in high school, I got to see Allen Iverson play. He was in my school district. I actually played basketball against Allen Iverson. At that same time, our crosstown rival had a guy by the name of Michael Vick. You may have heard of him. So I got to watch him in high school as well. So yeah, I grew up in Newport News. It was a pretty hotbed for some of the big stars, and Aaron Brooks was there as well, which is Michael Vick's cousin. I got to see him in high school. So a lot of guys that kind of came up at the same time I did, wanted to be NFL stars. So it's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, for sure. The sports connecting us all, tying us all. I mean, that's what we talk about most of the show. I know Yeti's here talking. He used to be a 200 average bowler. He says he haven't been in like 2 years, though. Work, kids, married life. We do know. We were talking about that earlier with just 4 podcasters and stuff. Eric Johnson, Fancy BBQ. Howdy, gents. Thanks
What's up,
for sent that in. Apparently, I guess with the someone saying you've just been 2% cooler in your book, Nemo. That's a grand total of 2% though for cool. So
I appreciate that.
I'm guessing that's a 1% for Iverson, 1% for Vic. The fact that you played against both, one each. Do have another question here. Again, I appreciate the fantasy questions, the fantasy talk. Ianic, I'm bad at reading, if that's not it. But if that is it, then I am good at reading. But Gibson or Saquon half PPR. So what are your thoughts, Geoff?
So I am probably higher on Gibson than pretty much everybody. I think I have him ranked at number 7, and I think I have Barkley at 9. Barkley is an injury risk for me. I'm a little nervous about that. They're talking about limiting him in the beginning of the season, which makes me nervous. I love Gibson. I think Gibson is going to be potentially the number 1 overall running back if they use him the way they keep talking about using him. I live here in Washington, so I hear all the radio talk, but I love Gibson this year, so it'd be Gibson for me, hands down.
Yeah. I think once it gets to full point PPR, I think that's where it tilts in favor of Barkley. If we think Barkley can be healthy, I mean, he caught 90 passes as a rookie, and while we, Gibson converted wide receiver, I don't know if we see those type of extreme pass reception numbers, especially with an aggressive quarterback like Fitzpatrick who loves to target the wide receivers more. So yeah, if it's full point PPR, I think it's Barkley fairly easily. But yeah, once you get down to the half point, touchdowns come more into factor. And while I'm not a biggest fan of Fitzpatrick, that offense might be the better one than operate better. I think it's really close. So I think it is a fair question. I might disagree with Geoff and still say Barkley. But I have been a little cooler on Barkley, and to be honest, Geoff, it's funny. We rewind to I guess 2 weeks ago, the episode of the Dynasty Gambit. So my co-host, the Fantasy Sports Doc, Dr. James Ferretti, as well as our guest Eric. I can't think of his last name now. Eric Johnson. Pros with Joe's Eric. We'll say that. I'm sure he'd love to talk about him.
Ramoff. I can't pronounce his name. It's like
Romoff. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Glad the guest knows so much. Such a knowledgeable guest. Thank you. But anyway, they both had Antonio Gibson in their top 5 dynasty running back. I know this is, I assume, more of a redraft question, but you're not the only one who's super high on Gibson. So I think we are a little split, but
now I will say one thing here, because I actually just did a draft, yesterday, like I mentioned, and I was the number 6 pick, and obviously Gibson was still there. I did not take Gibson in the first round, even though I have him ranked at number 7, because I knew, or I thought I knew, that he would be there in the second round. So there's a potential, depending on where you draft, you might be able to get Barkley and Gibson. I actually took, I can't remember who I took in the first round, but I took a stud running back in the first round, and I thought I would get him on the back end and get Gibson as well. And then my co-host, Ryan, who was 1 pick before me, knew that I loved Gibson and knew that he wouldn't make it past me. So he drafted Gibson 1 pick before me, so I didn't get both. But I think if you're at the end of the draft or the middle of a draft and you can get Barkley and potentially get Gibson in the second round, I would do that.
Yeah, I think Barkley would be going earlier. So if you're close to the turn and you want to play the draft board, it probably makes more sense to go Barkley Gibson. But yeah, I think if you're in the middle of the and it really is your first, and you want to minimize the risk, I get going Gibson. I know he is dealing with a bit of a toe injury that's obviously much less severe than the massive ACL and multiple ligament tear that Barkley is recovering from. So yeah, even though Gibson is currently hurt, he probably does possess less of a risk. So it's all about risk tolerance. Yeah, I'd go Jonathan Taylor over either personally. But apparently I said the name right, so that's good to see there. Another question here from Yeti Express: Is Mahomes now currently overvalued? Allen and Murray seem to be going over 2 rounds later. I don't know that that's always happening. Maybe in some drafts, I think you might find a draft where Mahomes is overvalued, where someone jumps early. Like again, the draft I was in this weekend, he went. It's a single quarterback league, and while 14 teams, still only one quarterback. He went mid second. Now the manager also went Kelsey Mahomes to start, so that stack kind of made sense. But I believe that that was a bit. Well, I think like 207. And then I remember Josh Allen was at the 3-4 turn. So there was about a round and a half difference. But I don't always see it. Sometimes you see them going close together. I think especially in super flex leagues, they'll both be first round picks anyway, maybe the first two.
I think in a 4-point passing touchdown, I think I actually have Allen and Murray ranked over Mahomes because Mahomes won't get as much rushing touchdowns as Allen and Murray will. And so you 6 points for a rushing touchdown. You only get 4 for a passing touchdown. So I might actually put Allen and Murray over Mahomes in a 4-point passing touchdown league.
I almost prefer to target the guys even cheaper than that. Like I'm going after Dak and Herbert even a couple rounds after that. So I would almost argue maybe they're all overvalued in single quarterback, but I think they're all overvalued in Superflex too. But I mean they're all going in the first round, so you kind of have to take them all there. Again, more fantasy questions here. So actually no, never mind. This is a trade offer for you, Geoff, in the going for 2 writers league. So
get the tight end premium league. So Kittle's worth way more than Gibson is by himself.
Yeah, I know there are the rushing first downs do exist, like this Scott Fishbowl scoring. It is kind of balanced, but yeah, I think 2-for-1 starters to that's a little expensive, Eric. I wouldn't pay that personally either. Luckily, I don't have Kittle or Hunt, so I don't have to worry about that. Yeah, if you want to come after and make trade offers to me, I'll worry about it.
For context, for the other listeners that aren't in our writers league, it's a 20 team league. It's the offense is positionless, so you basically can start. It's all flex, and one super flex, so you can start a QB, but you don't have to start a QB. So having starters in a 20 team league, if you ever played in a 20 team league, one copy, it gets really shallow really quick. So just having a starter at any position is worth having that, and giving up 2 of those for one player would be a little bit too steep for me.
Yeah, I think so too. So yeah, context matters in terms of number of starters and starting roster requirements, number of teams. That'll change when you're more tolerant to do those 2-for-1 deals. Okay, it's a 12 team start 8. That's when I'm going to try and consolidate and get the most elite assets. But which. To be fair, Eric's making the trade that gives us the better depth, so it's a smart offer to make, Eric, if you can get someone to accept it. Nemo, question. So what are we doing with JK and Etienne? And I'm going to assume this is from a dynasty context. Do you think they'll come back next year, or cutting your losses and trading them for what value you can get?
So a little bit of backstory here. Nemo was actually in that league that I'm just talking about that's been 23 years. Now, granted, he wasn't in there from the beginning. From the beginning, he was probably like 6. He's a lot younger than the rest of us, but he is in the league now. It is Dynasty, and he actually owns J.K. Dobbins and Etienne in that league, so bad luck for him. But I think I'm holding both of them. I think to sell either one of them right now, you're selling at an extreme discount. I do think both of them come back and still will be viable. And I think you can get more for them when we see them coming back. So if we see them at the beginning of next offseason, or at the end of next offseason, get ready to go into the season, and we're getting reports like ETN looks good or Dobbins looks good, and then you want to trade them, that's fine. But right now you're selling for an extreme discount. Unless you're getting something like really good for them, I think I'm holding them both.
I would especially maybe try and shop around Dobbins. I know I've got a dynasty share in a league with quite a few people from the Going for Two Live network, particularly my co-host Hamid on the dynasty game. But I know he's a big Dobbins fan, so I'm going to test the waters with him first and see what's he willing to pay for Dobbins at this point. I think between the two, I think I'd rather hold Etienne. It seems like his injury, okay, not needing surgery. They're going to see if he could rehab it without surgery, and he might even come back this year, at least be healthy enough to come back this year. They may just say sit out anyway. Um, so if he's able to recover without surgery, it seems like his recovery time will put him where he'll be 100% by the time next season comes. With Dobbins, we're not sure of that. So of the two, I'd look to maybe shop Dobbins first. Um, and I guess team context matters. Is this, are you going for it? Do you think, yeah, like even with the two running backs injured, is your team deep enough that you think you have a chance to go for it? I might look to offload them for, like, Josh Jacobs right now is so kind of cheap in Dynasty.
Yep.
I wonder if there's not much difference between them now with the injuries. Because I think, like, certainly Dobbins was rated, like, one trade I was seeing a lot in group chats was Jacobs and a first for Dobbins. That wouldn't always get accepted in leagues, but it seems like that was a trade that could happen and was potential, especially in super flex leagues. The value of those first kind of get boosted a little bit. So, if there was that much of a difference, be closer now where even if you're giving up a little bit more to get Jacobs and get that production, you're still getting a young running back on his rookie contract. So I'd look maybe for those, Miles Sanders. There's a bit of a stink on Miles Sanders right now. I'd look for those running backs that are kind of, they should produce but are undervalued, and look to especially offload Dobbins for one of them. Again, thinking purely as a contender. If you're a rebuilding team, maybe you just, like Geoff said, hope for higher value next year and hold them through that. And speaking of Geoff, well, my guest, of course, but Yeti has a message for you, Geoff. I have no idea if my team is good in that league, referring to our Going for Two Writers League, but he's saying, but I'm beating you week one, Geoff. So love the comment.
That's all he wants to do is beat me week one. Because, Yeti's not used to playing in leagues that deep, so he was a little out of his element drafting in a 20-team league. So, but I think he is projected to beat me week one.
Essa Saeed, Eckler or Chubb in PPR? So full point PPR. I love Chubb, but that might be enough to skew it with the format.
Yeah, the only thing with Eckler is that injury history scares me a little bit, but I think it's still probably Eckler because that upside is huge with the PPR side of things, because we know Chubb's not getting it as long as Kareem Hunt is healthy. Even if Kareem Hunt isn't healthy, I do think they get somebody else to take that passing work away from Chubb. So I think Chubb is what he is, but it's pretty good what he does. But I think Eckler would give me that little bit of bump in PPR.
Yeah, I could see Eckler, especially in full point PPR, as a top 5 back pretty easily, actually, just based purely on volume. And if he gets any sort of work inside the 5, I think the touchdown upside can get that top 5 upside. So yeah, I would go Eckler in the format. Although again, I love Chubb. I want him in as many leagues as I can right now.
Yep.
So Gerson here. Oh, this is a long one. I love Gerson. He's such a great part. I know. Speaking of shows every day, last week he was a marathoner. How many hours did he do on the Going for Two Live network last week? I mean, I got to think at least 2-3 hours stretched over a couple days. So
yep.
Great job, G. One advice I give people: if you play keepers and have IR, watch if one player drops Akers, Etienne, Dobbins, as well as if your team. If your team does round value keepers and their free agency or pick them with the last pick and use it as your keeper. That's true. You can stash those guys in IR. And again, if it's a keeper league, especially, and those count as free agent pickups, maybe it's like a last round keeper that it's almost a cheat code. Again, especially for a guy like Etienne, who, if everything goes well with his recovery in the next few months, he should be like no limitations by week 1 next year. So what is it? Sorry, I'm going to read the rest of what he is saying. Sorry for the long response. More of an advice. Oh, gee, you never have to say sorry. You're awesome, man. Question here from Nemo. Does Jamar Chase dropping passes all preseason concern you? He also says dropping passions. I don't know if that's I think that might have been maybe intended joke, which is amazing, Nemo, or not. But are you concerned with Jamar Chase, Geoff?
No, I'm not. Just like Jerry Jeudy had the dropsies last year, I'm not concerned with Jerry Jeudy this year either. I think I post this a lot in my Facebook chats when this subject comes up, but I took a blurb from, I think, RotoWire or RotoWorld last year, that said Bissy Johnson is the clear number 2 receiver in Minnesota, and then Justin Jefferson blows up. So I wouldn't concern myself too much with this drop thing in preseason. I think he'll be totally fine in the regular season. I think he's still the number 1 rookie receiver out there.
So off-network advertising, but it's still for me. So on the Full Press Fantasy Pod, we recently had an episode. Actually, your co-host Foss was on that one. We talked wide receiver trios, and the Bengals trio came up. So just quickly on the spot, like, who do you prefer out of those three? Chase, Boyd, and Higgins.
For this year, or just as a dynasty hold?
Yeah, we were talking specifically for this year. We can talk dynasty too, though.
For this year, give me T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins will be the one to lead that receiving core. I think in the long run, Jamar Chase takes that over. But I think T. Higgins, he has that 1 year under his belt. And I think, we've already seen a connection with him and Burrow. I think T. Higgins is the one I want out of that group for this year.
Yeti with some questions again. Don't want to give him the cold shoulder or anything. Who catches the ball in San Diego? I don't think anyone is. But with the Chargers, outside of Allen and Eckler, and I think Jeff would probably agree, though, likely the top 2 targets on the team and top 2 in receptions.
I would agree with that.
So Yeti's asking, is the third for the third on the team, is the answer as simple as Mike Williams? Is there anyone you want to kind of put forward?
Mike Williams is probably the right answer, but I wouldn't sleep on Jared Cook. We saw how much he targeted Hunter Henry last year, and Jared Cook is a pretty athletic tight end, had a pretty good couple seasons in New Orleans. So I think that Jared Cook could potentially be in that same range as Mike Williams. So I think it's between one of those two. Josh Palmer's there, the rookie. I don't think he's going to be in that mix quite just yet. But Mike Williams, Jared Cook are probably the number 3 option somewhere in there.
The Canadian Josh Palmer, I love to hear that, but I agree with you. It might this year. I think it's a little too early for him. Maybe even as early as next year, he could be like the number 2 wide receiver there, especially if Mike Williams leaves via free agency, entering the final year of his contract. Now, contract year, maybe that's something is to chase for Williams. I think it's the likeliest. And while I think Cook is a good option, the other tight end, the backup tight end, I guess, Donald Parham, came on strong last year.
Their XFL guy.
Right, former XFL, yeah. So he might also be a candidate as well. It does seem, though, it's like if it's not Mike Williams, it's probably not a wide receiver. Look for the tight ends, I think, is good. And yes, I think late round sleepers from the Chargers. I think that's they are still also the Oakland Raiders and the St. Louis Rams. I think the Cardinals are still in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. If not, they maybe maybe they're still in St. Louis as well. So another question. And this one's interesting. Waller or Kittle in PPR?
Oh, that one's tough because you're pulling on my Niners fandom there. I think for this season, I think it's still Waller. We know nothing's changed there really. It's Derek Carr, it's Waller. They're basically going to be the same thing. Whereas with 49ers, things have changed. Potentially a quarterback change at some point in the season. Ayuk and Deebo Samuel hopefully both stay healthy. I think our defense will be better, so I think they won't be passing as much. They'll be running more than they normally do. So the fact that nothing's really changed in Las Vegas, other than the fact that they're playing in Las Vegas, I think that Waller's still it.
Again, I think similar to earlier, because it's full point PPR, I think that is flip it, because I've got these two ranked so close. Like they're 2 and 3 for me. Actually, I do have Kittle still as my number 1 dynasty tight end. But for redraft, especially in full point PPR, I go for volume. And I think not a hot take here, that 49ers defense is significantly better than the Raiders. So in terms of just sheer volume of attempts, that's got to definitely favor the Raiders. And then you look at the talent around the tight end, Ruggs and Edwards, John Brown. Yes, they're there, but it seems like Waller's definitely going to be the number 1 target. And I think Kittle should be as well, but Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, it's a little bit more. Maybe you might not even say talent, but certainly already more success for those young receivers. So I think because it's full point PPR and you're going to rely so much on receptions, I would go Waller. in half point, I might switch to the efficiency. Kittle, like his yards efficiency is incredible, and the touchdown potential, I would go Kittle in half point. But because it's full point, I'm going to stick with Waller as well. So it's not just the fact that he's a 49er guy. I know Yeti wants to say that. Don't ask the 49ers guy that. Yeah,
I'm
so
able to
another
keep
comment.
my fandom out of my fantasy takes most of the time.
And I mean, again, you've been doing fantasy content for so long, so you've been you've been able to do that. You've been able to separate, detach, and gotten used to all that. I'm the irrational 49ers one because I'm always saying Jermichael Hasty, Jermichael Hasty. So uh, after
It looked
watching
good in
preseason,
preseason yesterday.
yeah, I mean, I still think from a pass catching perspective, outside of Wayne Gallman, no one else on that team has really done that or shown it like he
Yep.
has. 3 straight years of 25 receptions in college. So, for a running back, that's pretty good. Anyway, so after watching preseason, who's your dynasty sleeper running back? I just said it, Jermichael Hasty or wide receiver. And is this player someone you're trying to get from Dan?
And he's asking very, very specific questions. So my dynasty sleeper running back, I don't know if he can be a sleeper anymore. He's been playing so good in the preseason, but Ramondre Stevenson is my sleeper running back. I do think he's going really late. I got him yesterday in my draft. I made sure that I picked him probably a little bit earlier than I should have, but I do think he can be a touchdown machine there in New England. Dynasty sleeper wide receiver, that's a little bit tougher. No names are coming to mind right away. Maybe Marcus Callaway. I don't know if he can be a sleeper anymore either with the Saints, but I do think he can be the number one receiver there. We got Jameis Winston now, so there will be some more passing volume as opposed to Taysom Hill. So Marcus Callaway is someone that people are kind of sleeping on. Maybe haven't really seen what he can do yet, but I think he can be a good sleeper.
Yeah, some good points there. I think wide receiver is so tough to find a sleeper. I mean, is a sleeper just someone that's undervalued? I might again go back to the 49ers, not to make this all about them, but I feel like Brandon Ayuk's kind of undervalued.
Yep.
And I mean, even though he's like, I see him every draft, he's going ahead of Debo, but like I don't think it's a hot take to say that he's kind of established as the number one receiver there. His rookie season so far, from a points per game perspective, better than either of Debo's first 2 seasons. So
yeah, and Debo's ADOT last year averaged up a target, I think, was a -1 yard. He actually was behind the line of scrimmage more often than he was ahead of it. So it's kind of crazy.
And everyone was complaining about Juju and Deontay Johnson about how that depth of target was so negative. But I mean, at least those guys are like 5-6 yards
Right.
for average 8 odds. So, but yeah, Yeti's wanting to know about Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell, the rookie running back for the Eagles.
It's tough because the coaching staff has changed a little bit. In the past, the Eagles were running back by committee. I don't know what they're going to be looking at this year with Miles Sanders. Is he going to be the bell cow? Are they going to mix it up? Boston Scott's still in the mix. So Gainwell in a dynasty league, yes, I would take him. But if we're looking at a redraft league, not until late, because I do think that he has to have some things happen before he'll be a starter and be someone you can put in your lineup.
Yeah, for redraft, I'd rather draft Boston Scott.
Agreed.
But yeah, Dynasty. I mean, he's got a good pass catching ability. Talk about that pass catching profile. Like he's someone that's got a better profile than Jermichael Hasty. Great years there with Memphis. Which, to be fair, I mean, coming from what Antonio Gibson does, right? So that whole system, like those running backs that especially showed pass catching in that profile. Gibson so far has translated pretty well. So maybe Gainwell can as well. It seems like he fell further than what his talent indicated. I think a good dynasty pickup. For the rookie running backs, I believe I've got him ranked 6th or 7th. I think it's him and Chuba Hubbard. I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for, especially if you have a Christian McCaffrey and you want to handcuff him, that might be the way to go. But if you're looking for pure upside, Gainwell might catch passes, especially if you like the pass catching back. So
and Miles Sanders is really the epitome of health either. So Miles Sanders goes down, maybe it's a Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell kind of committee.
Yeah, true. Running backs, right? But so I just wanted to say thanks, guys. I appreciate it just for all the questions we've been answering. And yeah, Geoff, thanks for going a little extra on those questions. I want to get back to our regularly scheduled program. I think you kind of answered the one thing no one in the fantasy community knows about you is your photography background. I don't know that anyone could picture that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one thing that I don't talk about a lot, photography, but there's a couple other things too. I think I also mentioned, before starting the podcast that I stuttered. I mean, I was I literally couldn't talk in high school. Even to this day, there's words that I have trouble starting sentences with that I just can't say. Sometimes you hear me on the podcast where I may say something very, very fast, and they're like, "Why did he say it so fast?" It's probably because I had the feeling I was going to stutter, so I just blurted right through it, and that's how I kind of deal with it. In my adult life, is just talk really fast, and then they won't know you're stuttering. So that's kind of my defense mechanism. And the other thing that I don't talk about much too is no one would think this either, but I love reggae music. That's when you go in my car, it's basically what I have playing 24/7. Whenever I'm grilling, it's reggae music in the background. So it's something that you wouldn't look at me and think, oh yeah, he likes reggae music, but it definitely isn't the thing. But yeah, I love reggae.
Just to kind of touch on the subject, do you find that podcasting has helped you with the stuttering? Just force a habit having to get through podcasting. Do you find it helps at
It
all?
definitely helped me. I think having a show sheet was the first thing that I had to learn because I don't stutter if I'm reading. So when I'm looking at my show sheet, I can go through without stuttering, which is why my show sheets are now legendary. People that come on my show like, man, you like basically wrote the entire show down on your show sheet because yeah, that helps me to keep things under control. So that's definitely a really important thing. Also, my professional job. So when I first started out in 1998. I became a manager in a retail store. So, in a manager, you got to talk in big groups and talk to your employees and everything else. So that kind of also helped me get out of my stuttering habit by learning how to deal with it in big groups. But definitely, podcasting has definitely changed a lot. But show sheets are one of the key things that I got to have. I got to have some show sheets to keep myself in line.
Yeah, I know Foss kind of referenced that when he was on the show, and I sent in basically, okay, these are the teams we're talking about. They're like, just name the team, put the last name of the players, and then we'll figure it all out from there. I definitely fly in the seat of my pants a little bit, but yeah, no, everyone's got to do their own system to help them be best. And I think maybe that's more good podcasting advice, right? Is find the system that works for you, works best for you, whatever gives you confidence and makes you comfortable to to go in and host as seamlessly as possible. Don't be afraid to do whatever is best for you.
Yep, and it definitely helps you keep in line too. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I have a long commute, so I listen to podcasts all the time. And I do not like the podcasts so much that if I turn them on, they seem to have no direction. It's like they just hit the record button and then just started talking, and a lot of inside jokes that no one knows about. Those kind of things. I don't like those kind of podcasts. Give me a little bit of direction. Yes, you can go off on a tangent, talk about whatever, but come back to what you were originally talking about. I feel like they start off like, oh, we're talking about receivers today, and then but before you know it, they're talking about running backs and quarterbacks, and you didn't get back to the original subject. Kind of loses me at that point.
Yeah, true. As someone who likes to ramble and tangent, it's always got to keep it full circle, though. You do have to come back at some point.
Exactly.
So I guess, what is one revelation you wish you'd gotten earlier in life would be the next question. Is it something like that like, close your tangents off, don't go too long? I mean, you can go with a little more profound if you want to, of course.
So one revelation, I didn't even actually, I must have missed that question. Trying to think.
The question is now a revelation to you.
Yeah. Come back to that one. Let me think on that one a little bit.
Well, okay, we'll go back to a fantasy question, actually, because Nemo does have one. Who will have a better career, Devontae Smith or Jamar Chase?
That's an easy one. It'll be Jamar Chase for me. I think Devontae Smith I wasn't high on. I actually had the opportunity to draft him, and I took Rashad Bateman over him. I'm not a big fan of Devontae Smith. I don't know why. I like Jamar Chase a lot more. I think he got the better situation with the quarterback. We assume Burrow's going to be there for a while. Jalen Hurts, we're not sure if he's going to be the quarterback of the future. They were talking about drafting a quarterback this year. If Hurts struggles this year, then maybe they draft one next year. They traded for Gardner Minshew. So I don't know if Smith is going to have the quarterback on his team to have the ability to have a good career. So give me Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I think, Chase's, college season last year especially was insane, right? I mean, Heisman winning wide receiver, right? Like I don't think that had ever happened before.
Right.
But, just college success doesn't always translate to be NFL success. I'm looking through Heisman winners. So everyone remembers 2005, the Heisman winning Reggie Bush, and I will say he won the Heisman. Whatever they can, the NCAA can make whatever crooked rules they want, but we'll go with the truth there. Reggie Bush won it, but the next year, 2006, I don't know if anyone remembers this. Ohio State quarterback. Do you know? 2006 Heisman winner. I'll let the listeners say
I,
this. I'll get back to that in a sec, see if anyone knows it. The 2006 Heisman Trophy winner, but like I think that's part of the problem is maybe no one knows this person. But just kind of the whole point of college success doesn't always translate, and I think better career. What are we talking? I think are you comparing like impact on their teams? Because maybe there is a chance Devontae Smith does, but are we talking fantasy football? And I think better career we are thinking dynasty. So we're talking dynasty value. I know Scott Connor has brought this up, a former guest on this show. Also former guest on my other podcast as well. Super smart dynasty mind when it comes to game theory and roster construction strategies. And his thing is the undersized receivers, while they may produce, their overall value doesn't ever match what that production is. And maybe Devontae Smith, because he won the Heisman, because he was drafted so early, maybe he breaks that mold. But like Scott's argument is basically that like Devontae Smith would have to kind of smash almost to the level of like Justin Jefferson last year and kind of keep doing that before he's really viewed as a true top 5 wide receiver with that difference making price where people are going to give up multiple firsts. So it seems like from an investment standpoint, you're better off going with the bigger body receivers. I know that's why he's pushing up Terrace Marshall kind of almost ahead of really every receiver in this class. But Chase just seems to have like the profile from the young age. Broke out right away as soon as he got there, even with talented receivers around him. So yeah, I would also go with Chase, and because I think especially from a fantasy value perspective, I think that's where it's really going to make a difference. Whereas if Chase smashes year one, he's going to skyrocket and just like Jefferson, maybe be the wide receiver 1 next year. Whereas if Devontae Smith has that type of season, I don't think he's going to be the wide receiver 1. He might be viewed as a dynasty top 12 wide receiver, but I don't see him ever getting to that unless he's doing it year after year. And even then, okay, you've lost those years where he happened. Is he ever reclaiming that later? Like it may always be an excuse. So I know Nemo has kind of his own view. Literally, actually, sorry, we'll get back to that in a sec. But longevity basically will be the GOAT. When I think of great careers like Megatron, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Antonio Brown, Brown's kind of the difference maker mold in terms of body type. But it seems like he's also got the ability to separate like no one else ever, almost no one else ever really has. So I don't know that like Devontae Smith would really have to be like Antonio Brown level to get that. And I mean, he was the wide receiver 1 like 3-4 years in a row again. So like if Smith doesn't do that, I don't think he's ever seen the good value. So that was a really long-winded way to say that. Chase, sorry. But Nemo apparently saying literally known you my whole life, never knew you had a stutter. So I guess the podcast is working for you, Jeff.
Yeah, like I said, he is a lot younger than us. I actually have known him since he was probably 2 years old, maybe 3. But yeah, I've known him his whole life. So by the time he got to the age where he knew me well enough, I had already kind of worked the stutter out of my language.
Yet he just saying, while Marshall has his upside seems massive to me, but at the same time he's still wide receiver 3 in Carolina. So yeah, I think year 1 especially could be a little hurtful, and I guess maybe he'll be wide receiver 3 there for a couple of years with Robbie Anderson getting that big extension. We'll see what DJ Moore if he gets an extension with them too. So to answer the question, 2006 Heisman Trophy winner Troy Smith. I remember he played in the CFL. He was awful even there. So like, let alone like the NFL, but like I remember he played some games for the Alouettes and he was just brutal. Like he might have got 3-4 starts and they benched him. So like, great college success doesn't really mean anything really. Like they've got to prove that they can have success in the NFL. So I think even though, Smith has that Heisman stuff, I don't know that that's really affecting his fantasy value. People are going to truly say they might help him, or if he flops completely his first year, it might help so that the value doesn't bottom out, but I don't think it's helping him reach a ceiling. Okay, so here's interesting. Nemo's asking, what's a fair offer for Terrace Marshall? So let's say in a dynasty league. I mean, I think
right. If we're talking, obviously I don't want to put players' names on that, but I think he's been hyped up now. I don't think you can get him for less than a first-round pick right now.
I was going to say that if you really wanted him, if you were a competing team or had multiple firsts, and you really want him, I could see giving away one of those firsts. I wouldn't do that in a super flex league. And again, if that costs that, I think that costs a little too high. If it's a single quarterback league, I'm probably willing to give up that first, especially if I kind of project it to be late. Next year's class doesn't look to be that great, so I don't know. I wouldn't give up a 2023 first. I kind of want to hold on to those right now because those seems like that draft class seems like it could be a massive value, similar to what we saw last year in 2020. So a 2022 first in a single quarterback league is like the highest price I would be willing to pay.
Agreed.
So
that's right.
So Yeti said that he Googled it, but Jeff Bell would have known. Yeah, I'll honestly, if I guess tune into WRL tomorrow night. No longer on the Going to Future Network, but I might still tune into that and see if I'll quiz Jeff on that. I know they do have their trivia segment on that show, so maybe I'll suggest that should be the trivia question and name what team he played for professionally. Montreal Alouettes. For anyone listening. But yeah, I guess we can get back to the actual questions, trying to, to the person I'm trying to interview here, Jeff.
So you can go back to the one revelation. I think I came up with something.
Yeah, sure.
I wish that I had gotten into content creation sooner. 2015 is when I started. I already had a daughter, I had a wife, I was married, I had a house. I wish I had gotten into it when I could have truly gotten into it. You know what I mean? Like I could have almost made this like my career. But it's hard to have a career change when you've got, a mortgage and a wife and a daughter to support. If I was single and, living at home in my parents' basement or whatever, and I'd gotten into content creation then and fantasy football, maybe I would have been, able to put more into it and be something that I could just do as a living. But right now, I think it's too difficult to make that switch. But that's something that I think I would have done.
So, yeah, I think it's, I guess the revelation is almost that you could do it, really.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess maybe to anyone doubting if they can do it, I think it's the limits are only what you set yourself. So you
got to make that leap. All the guys that I've talked to that I've had on my podcast, that I talked to on Twitter, that have made that leap to making it a career, it's a leap that you just have to make. There's no you're not going to be able to do both and then just slowly work your way into it. If you're going to do it and you want to make it a career, you got to go feet first and jump into it.
One last one before we get to the fantasy questions. I guess we've been doing a lot of fantasy questions, but if you could interview one person all time on, we'll say your podcast, but you can in any context really, who would that be, Jeff?
So I wrote down two names, and they're both sort of their prime was before my time, but just kind of looking back, one of them would be Bob Marley. I mentioned already that I'm a reggae music fan, and he kind of created that genre. I mean, we're listening to his music, how long later after his death, we're still listening to his music. I still crank it in my car all the time. So talking to Bob Marley would be really cool. And Muhammad Ali would be the other one. You see some interviews now of Muhammad Ali and just some of the things he would say and the way he would put words together. It was always so cool. I mean, TikTok now, you go on TikTok, type Muhammad Ali, you're going to see a ton of interviews and different things and how he would articulate his words. And unfortunately, he lost his voice or lost his ability to use his voice later in life. But early on in his career, I mean, he was a very fun person. Like I said, it was before my time, so I didn't get to see him. But yeah, it would have been really cool to interview Muhammad Ali.
So he wants to know if the answer is actually Allen Iverson, and asking how his ankles are after you broke them, just to bring him on. And
yeah, I wish that was how that scenario went down. No, I was stuck having to guard Allen Iverson, and the ankles that were broken were mine, not his. He was a pretty amazing high school athlete. He actually played football as well. They won the state championship in basketball and in the NFL in football as well the same year. And he actually played quarterback, running back, and receiver in consecutive playoff games. He was that good. So one week he was the receiver, 1 week he was a running back, and he finished off as the quarterback in the last game. So he was a pretty amazing athlete in high school.
Can't plan for him, right? Okay, yeah, get this coverage for him. Oh wait, no, he's in the backfield now the entire game. Darn. Okay,
yep.
Okay, we got a key on him backfield, and oh wait, no, he's passing the ball. Uh-oh. Yeah,
yep. I think he had an interception with DB as well. It went for a touchdown. So I mean, he did everything.
Allen Iverson, yeah, what a legend.
He could have played in the NFL if he wasn't 5'11". He's not 6 foot. If you look at the NBA sites, he's 6 foot now. I was 6'3" in high school. He was like 5'11", 5'10", if.
But it didn't even matter, right?
Didn't matter. He's definitely the best pound for pound scorer the NBA's ever seen, in my opinion.
All right. Well, there's a revelation right there for some people, maybe. So fantasy football, Jeff, as quick as you can, because I feel like sometimes this question drags on. But what are your thoughts on zero RB? I guess you've already kind of shared them, so if you want to go into any more detail, feel free.
Yeah, I don't like zero RB. I know like the strategy behind it, and that running backs don't matter, and you can get one in the late rounds that'll end up being, and they always point to certain ones that, no one saw James Robinson come in, and you could have got him in the late rounds. Yes, that's true. That can happen, but I rather the sure thing. Give me the running back. Give me the volume. Receivers are so deep. Some teams go three deep. Like we're talking about the Bengals. I mean, you can draft literally all three of those receivers in that offense. You're not going to find that anywhere else with running backs. There's no running backs that are three deep that you're going to be able to draft and put into your lineup. So I always get my running backs early. I stack running backs. I think in the Scott Fish Bowl, I went four straight running backs, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because that's a different kind of a league. So many teams that you're trying to beat, but yeah, running backs by far. Get the running backs early, or receivers later. I know the logic behind it, and I get it. And if you hit on some of those guys, like if you were to draft, last year James Robinson and Mike Davis might have been one of those guys on your list, then yeah, you can obviously win your league that way. But I think it's easier to find a receiver late that can produce, as opposed to guessing on which running back is going to be able to take over and from a hurt running back and be a number one running back that year. So no, I think zero RB is not my strategy for sure.
I think for fantasy, if anything, I'd say wide receivers don't matter. And I mean, Nemo kind of says it perfectly here. You can always get a wide receiver in the late rounds, but RBs are very few and are very far and few.
Yep.
He says next, at least fantasy relevant ones. And so, yeah, I would agree with that. That if you went zero RB last year and started Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, and you were thinking, okay, my zero RB target is Alexander Madison, probably didn't have a good season or good draft. So it's strategies can work if you pick the right players. So if you went RB early and picked McCaffrey or Barkley, it was just as bad as going Thomas or Godwin. If you went zero RB with Devontae Adams, Travis Kelce, or you went robust RB starting Dalvin Cook and maybe David Montgomery coming around, like both strategies would have worked. So it's about picking the right players anyway.
Yep, exactly.
The evolution of the tight end position has changed fantasy football. It's true. The elite ones have kind of pushed themselves up so much further that they're just kind of forcing you to take them earlier and earlier. So let's get to that, I guess, actually. All-time fantasy, QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1. So now, right, Geoff, this is where you have to prove you keep your fantasy and team fandom of the 49ers separate. I mean, is this list going to be full of 49ers?
Unfortunately, ironically, it is, but not because of the fact that they're 49ers. It's just the fact that they helped me win championships. And these are not going to be on anyone's all-time lists. These are very specific guys that I picked up. I'll just go through them. So the first one, let's go quarterback. It is the 2000 version of Jeff Garcia. I picked him up off of the waivers that year. He had 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions. A guy that I think he had been benched the year before. No one saw him coming. Obviously, him and T.O. had a connection. He had an amazing year. Got him off waivers. I also had T.O., so I had that stack. They had a great season that year and won a championship with Jeff Garcia in my lineup. So he's my all-time great because of that memory of having that, quarterback off the waiver wire that ended up being the league winner. Receiver, a guy that played for the 49ers at one point in his career, but actually had him when he played for the Cardinals. The 2007 version of Anquan Bolden. He only had 853 yards that year. He only played in 12 games. He had some injuries. But in the championship game, which I was in, he had 13 catches, 162 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and literally dragged my team to a championship because the rest of my guys didn't show up. So thankfully, Anquan Bolden did and carried me to a championship that year. So Anquan Bolden, shout out to you. Vernon Davis is my tight end. Again, a 49er, but there's a story behind that one as well. One of the guys in my league that's still in the current league now, Troy, he drafted Vernon Davis and another tight end that was pretty good too, and I can't think of which the tight end was, but he had 2 good tight ends. He didn't really mean to do it that way, but he did. And there was a receiver for the Patriots that was lighting up preseason, and I ended up trading this receiver to Troy for Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis went on that year to tie his NFL record of 13 touchdowns for a tight end, later broke by Gronk, but amazing year by Vernon Davis. I won a championship. The receiver that I traded to Troy is a guy by the name of Kimbrell Tompkins, who no one probably even knows his name. He had 32 catches for 466 yards and 4 touchdowns, and I traded him straight up before the season started. I said, Vernon Davis, Kimbrell Tompkins, we'll switch him. And Vernon Davis went on to have an amazing season and won me a championship that year. So those are my. Oh, I got one more. Adrian Peterson. He's my running back. So this is the story behind Adrian Peterson. This is in the 2,000-yard season that he had. I didn't draft Peterson. I drafted guy from the Chiefs, and his name just
Charles.
Jamal Charles. They both had great seasons. I think Charles had 1,800 yards. He could have had 2,000. Peterson did have 2,000. So I traded for Adrian Peterson before week 9. And this is who I traded for to get Adrian Peterson. I traded Tom Brady and a guy by the name of Mikel LaShore, a running back for the Lions at the time.
Lions, yep.
So the week 9 game was the first game that I had Adrian Peterson in the first game that he had Mikel LaShore. And Mikel LaShore played in the early game and had 70 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I'm like, damn, I made a mistake. I should have kept Mikel LaShore. He's going to be the next big thing. Peterson had his late game at 4 o'clock, and he had 182 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I felt a whole lot better after that. Mikel LaShore went on to do nothing after the rest of the season. Obviously, Peterson went on to have a 2,000-yard season. I had Peterson and Jamal Charles on my team, and they dragged me to the championship game, which unfortunately I lost that game. But the fact that I even got there with those 2 guys was pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I believe Charles was also coming off an ACL tear the season
correct.
before.
Yep.
So
he was overshadowed.
The all ACL recovery team. Good job. Way to predict that.
Funny thing is, the rest of my team was hurt because I had Greg Jennings, I had Percy Harvin, I had all these other guys that got hurt, and I had these 2 guys. Literally, I was streaming every position except for those 2 running backs, and they carried me to the championship.
Yeah, those running backs can do that. A lot of carries. So what's your preferred league format? And then you can also go into like specific scoring settings or roster settings that you also prefer.
So preferred league format, if I'm starting a league right now today, it's probably going to be Superflex. It used to not be my favorite. I used to not like Superflex. I didn't like 2 quarterback leagues. I thought it was kind of silly to have 2 quarterbacks until I actually was forced to play in one. And I kind of saw like, okay, that's, it does put a value and an onus. Yes, no kickers. Right, exactly. That's definitely a league setting that I need to have in mind.
It's our motto here at Going for 2.
Exactly. I don't have my hat on tonight, but yeah, we got no kickers in any of my leagues. But yeah, Superflex would be the way I would like to go with it. A few of the league formats that I've done that I really like. I actually did one of my own this year. Last year I played in a guillotine league, or guillotine, or however you pronounce that word. But it was a little bit different than a regular guillotine league. It wasn't just 16 teams and one team is eliminated each week. It was divisions, and each division was a team in itself. So you were encouraged to collude. You would draft. You could trade players back and forth each week. Like, hey, my running back's on a bye. Trade me Swift, and I'll give you this receiver so I can have him for this week. And your goal was to get one of you to the championship game or to the last game of the season. I made it all the way to second place. Unfortunately, lost in the last game. But this year I started on my own. It's an 18-team league. Because of the extra week, we had to go to 18 teams. It's 6 divisions of 3 teams each, and each division is its own team. We just finished our draft just recently. And like I said, you're encouraged to collude with your teammates. You're trying to get one of you to the championship, to the end of the season. So it's a really fun way to do things. It makes the draft funner because you're like, okay, should we do a quarterback run here? Should we all get quarterbacks and deplete the quarterbacks? During the season, you're talking about waivers. Like, okay, I'm going to put, because it's a guillotine league, so someone loses, someone has the lowest point total, they get eliminated. All their players go into the player pool. So waiver wire is big. You got to talk to your teammates. Hey, I'm going to bid on Christian McCaffrey, who's out there in waiver wire now. I'm going to bid on Stephon Diggs and see if we can get both of them to our team. And, so it's a really cool format to try to create some new strategy.
Everyone loves trash talking around here. Nemo's talking about how he's playing you week 1 and he's going to whoop. We talked about Adrian Peterson early, or in terms of whipping and stuff. Anyway, we'll fly past that topic. Favorite formats, talk about favorite players. Yeti Express saying he won fantasy Super Bowls with Trent Green. So he's his GOAT, apparently. So Trent Green. So everyone's got those players. final section of the show now. So high fives. And we're going to talk about top five from five different questions. So, Geoff, we're going to start with top five artists or bands.
All right, so some of these guys, no one's probably gonna even recognize these names. The first one, and me and my wife's, probably favorite person to go watch, is a guy by the name of Citizen Cope. He actually is from Washington D.C. He's now gone international and travels all over the place. And ironically, when we went on vacation a couple weeks ago, he was supposed to play in Outer Banks the week after we left. I was pretty upset about that, but it would have been really cool because the venue was like super small. It would have been cool to watch him. But Citizen Cope is one of my favorite all time. And then a couple of my favorite reggae bands, Soja, Soja, which stands for Sons of, I can't remember, it's Sons of Jah Army. So Soja is one of my favorite reggae bands. Revolution, also one of my favorite reggae bands, and Stick Figure are probably my top three. And then I had to put some old school hip hop in there. I'm also a hip hop head. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when hip hop was really big. So my favorite band, so to speak, rap group is Outkast. I love Outkast. I listened to every single album growing up. I think their AT-Aliens album was in my car so much that I became known as the guy that always played Outkast. Like whenever you got into my car, it was Outkast on the radio somehow, some way. So I loved Outkast growing up. So those are my five.
I actually thought when you're going to talk about rap, I thought you were going to go Wu-Tang as that last one.
Wu-Tang is also on that list as well, but Outkast is a little bit above Wu-Tang because I almost feel like I discovered Outkast, so to speak. Like I was listening to Outkast before anybody else was. Players Ball was their first hit that I can remember, and no one even knew who Outkast was then, and I was cranking it in my car. And then, of course, they went on to have this huge career after that. So I feel like I discovered Outkast. I know I didn't really discover them, but you know what I mean.
No, that's awesome. You have to get that feeling because I do know you're in the Wu-Tang Clan division in Scott Fishbowl, so that's why I did want to reference that.
Outkast was my number 2 choice.
Okay, so I'm glad I at least got one of your choices. So top 5 books.
So books was tough because I haven't read books in so long that I had a hard time coming up with one. So I just chose the last series of books that I read, and I've heard that they're supposed to be making a movie out of this series too. I hope they do it right. But it's called The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and it's in the same sort of genre as Game of Thrones, and it's hard to explain the storyline. I don't want to get too much into it, but basically if you took like the fantasy world of Game of Thrones and then gave everybody like Star Wars force-like abilities, they weren't really like spells. They were born with an ability to do things, and that was kind of their the force. And that was kind of the whole story. The whole premise of the book was based on that. And in the beginning of the book, only females could do it. The males, if they got the ability, they went crazy and tried to take over the world. But really cool story, really cool books. I think there's like 12 or 13 of them. It went so long that the author actually died at one point and had to be picked up by another author to be finished off. But I think he did a very good job as well. So The Wheel of Time. So I'm just going to put all of those books into one top 5.
Okay, yeah, that's efficiency, right? That's why we like George Kittle so much. So top 5 movies.
All right, I'll count them down from 5 to 1. So a few of them I did series. The Avengers movies. I love the Avengers movies, all of them. So I put them as my 5th. And then moving up from there, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. It's probably a movie that not a lot of people have seen, but it's actually a really good. It's like a dark comedy, I guess. It's kind of a gangster comedy movie. And then the next one I have on there is Snatch, which was by the same director and sort of the same premise, some of the same characters created there, but that was my number 3. The Lord of the Rings series is my number 2. I love Lord of the Rings. Obviously I read those kind of fantasy type books growing up. And my number 1 movie of all time is Braveheart. I had Braveheart on VHS, and on VHS you had to have 2 VHSs to put the movie onto 2. And I watched both of those movies so much that they actually wore out that I couldn't watch it anymore. I had to go eventually buy it on DVD.
So just a couple chime-ins for favorites. So Nemo's talking about favorite book being Cat in the Hat. Hats off to that. I guess I'm keeping the hat on. And then Yeti Express talked about 2 of his favorite movies, Coach Carter and Happy Gilmore. So there you go.
Good choices.
Two pretty opposite ends, like inspiring, dramatic, and then like Adam Sandler comedy. I
Yeah,
love it.
exactly.
Both involving sports, though, right? And so, again, centering the conversation around sports. Geoff, your top 5 game day foods.
Game day foods. Pizza is probably my number one food in general. So obviously, game day, I'm going to have pizza. Wings, another pretty much a staple. Nachos, gotta love nachos. And Nemo's going to love my next one here because I know he's a big fan of this too. But chili. I love chili in the fall. I make an awesome chili. It's jalapeno, bacon, and jalapeno. I can't think of the name of it now. I've lost it. But it's jalapeno and bacon in the chili, so you can't go wrong with that, right? A pineapple. That's the other thing it has in it. Jalapeno bacon with pineapple, which you don't actually expect in a chili, but it actually does it really well. And my last one is jalapeno poppers that are actually wrapped in bacon. I actually make those as well. I grill them. I put some cheese, some cream cheese, and fire roasted tomatoes inside, and then wrap them in bacon and grill them on the thing, and pretty awesome. So those are my top 5.
So Nemo is like, I'm sure, expecting you to let him know every time you're making these, right? Like whether it's the chili,
Yep.
jalapeno poppers, he's mentioning them all.
Yep.
Brought up another one. Alliterations are awesome, so I do appreciate this, and probably taste good too. Beer battered burgers.
Beer
Bravo.
batter. Yep, those are definitely good too. Those are on my list as well. Maybe
Just
6th.
so, Nemo mentioned Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know if that's for book or movie, but I mean, there's been some good versions of both.
Of both. I like Count of Monte Cristo. That's a good one.
Yeah, my exposure is more the original French, whether it's both in book or film version. But I maybe you've seen an English adaptation, but yeah, they do it pretty well. So it's a great story. Yeti saying, I love seeing them people making nachos on a table with tinfoil. I've never done it, but we'll soon. So we'll see the results of that. And Nemo saying both. Both. I think the French, especially I could think of one French film adaptation. Geez, I can't think of the actor's name. That would have give me some street cred there. Blonde hair. I could picture him. He's been in a few movies.
I think the only one I've seen is the one with Guy Pearce. I know Guy Pearce is in it, and I can't think of the other actors or actresses in that one, but that's a good one that I liked as well. Count of Monte Cristo.
Anyway, I know you referenced it with the Wheel of Time. Did I say that right?
Yep.
You're saying hoping they do it well, right? And that's always the word with books, how well they do the movies. I feel like, again, the Count of Monte Cristo versions I've seen film-wise, they have been well done. So, this is going to be quite a basically film-length episode. I guess a lot of them are actually, but we'll keep going. The final top 5. So top 5 49ers Super Bowls. So, I mean, I guess they've technically played in more than 5, but they've obviously won 5. So, I assume you're going with those 5. So, how would you rank them?
Yeah, so I'm going to rank them. Let's see. Obviously, number 1 is the one we talked about already. So, I won't give that one away. That's a pretty easy one.
So, that'd be what? That would be 88?
88, 89 season, yep.
Okay.
And the Chargers one, I'm going to put at 5. It was a blowout, and it was fun to watch. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a great game per se. And I'll put the 82 one at number 4 because I barely even remember that. I think I was 6, so I mean, I watched it. I remember watching it, but I don't remember nothing about that one. What other one is there? I can't think of all the years now.
You got Dolphins, I guess. I think that's what, 84, and then Broncos in 89.
89, yeah. The Broncos one was probably the number 2 one because that's after I become a fan, and I was, really excited about that. I think they went back to back, so that was the Broncos probably number 2, and then I'll slide the Dolphins in at number 3. So that's my top 5 right there. Obviously, the 2 we lost kind of hurt, especially the one against the Ravens because my daughter was born 2 weeks before that game. So now whenever I think of that game, I also have to think that, my daughter was born. So there was some good stuff in that year. So I can't just miss that whole Super Bowl, for that reason.
So yeah, and I think especially that second one, right? Once you're a fan and they beat the Broncos for a while, that was the largest blowout in Super Bowl history. I wonder if that still stands. I don't think so.
I don't think it was broken by I want to say the Cowboys.
Was it the Broncos? The Broncos Seahawks one, the Manning versus the Legion of Boom, and it really laid the boom on them. So it might have been that might have been what finally outdid it. But I think, like you said, it's 55-10. So incredible blowout that was never in doubt, really. And yeah, so I was a little surprised that the 84 one going head to head against Dan Marino, getting the win. Was a little higher, but it makes sense with what you did put those top two is the two back to back and really solidifying your fandom.
Yep, that's definitely what made me the fan. Like I said, previous to that '88 championship against the Bengals, I watched Super Bowls, but I wasn't a fan per se. I wasn't watching every game every week. I was still too young to really even know what the heck was going on. It wasn't until that year that I was like, okay, I know what football is and I love it, and it kind of built from there.
Especially you were saying like you didn't play the sport, right? So your learning experience of it was purely through watching and fandom, and that is like the learning curve does seem like it's a little difficult just from the television viewing aspect. Like you really need to play it to really understand it without watching as much as we watch now. So yeah, Yeti talk about 43-8 Denver. Still saying he has to time travel back to 1995. I guess the only good storyline you mentioned, that blowout against the Chargers, really the only storyline there is, can Steve Young get the win? Obviously the 49ers were capable of winning, but yeah, Steve Young getting that win. And I know Nemo wanted to mention some other
games. I think it was was it a playoff game? I can't remember if it was the playoff or Super Bowl.
I mean, I know it's the Super Bowl record for touchdowns. I believe he threw 6. It's the highest scoring fantasy performance by any player ever. I guess, if you give like extra points per reception, you can maybe give some arguments to some other players. But Jim Caviezel.
Guy, yeah, Count of Monte Cristo. That's the other guy. I think he also played. He famously played. He played Jesus in the movie that I think was called Jesus or something. But that was the other actor in that one with Guy Pearce.
All right. So yeah. So again, thanks Nemo for sharing the names, and thanks Geoff for sharing your time. So we'll plug whatever you want here. I know there's so much going on, going for 2 Live Network and going for 2 in general. NFL season's approaching, so of course we're busy.
Yeah. So the thing I want to plug the most right now, we're getting close to the season, is our DFS charity contest right now. If you visit goingfor2.com/grinder, singular grinder, no S. Grinder 21, you can sign up for the DFS contest. It's free to join, literally free. You just go there, sign up. I'll send you the link to the DraftKings contest. We do ask that you donate. If you can donate $5, whatever it is, to the GoFundMe account. I think we're getting close to $900 now, and I haven't put my deposit in yet. So I think once we do that, we'll be a little over 1,000. We're hoping to get to 1,200 before the season starts. So I do think we got some time to still do that. And let me show you the belt while I'm at it. This is the belt that you could win if you are the winner of that championship game. It's just for week 1, no commitment, just a week 1 contest. So get in there again, goingfor2.com/grinder21.
And I mean, if you're like me, get in there early so you can just like endlessly tinker with that lineup from here on till that the season starts, and regret whichever one of the lineups you didn't submit finally is the one that ended up being the best at winning. And I echo this statement entirely, Yeti. I want that belt. I do want that. I want to win. I know I kind of came close last year. I think I was like 8th or something like that, top 10. So, but last year doesn't count for anything. It's restarting completely. So I know I tied for the win in your DFS draft contest this year. So I'm hoping like 2021's my year. I can keep that momentum forward.
You also came pretty close in our Thanksgiving contest as well. I think it was also it was the Fight for Addiction contest, and I think you also were up in this. So you've been pretty close a few times.
Need to get that win. But yeah, so looking forward to that. But yeah, anyone who's as competitive as I am, I encourage you to join and of course donate to charity. I'll plug the gear. So goingfor2.com/store or viridianglobal.com, because Viridian is the maker of all this great gear, hats. I love this shirt as well. Totally repping the Going for 2 gear, trying to look good for the boss here. Yeti's one last mention that showmanship that has is unreal. The showmanship that has is unreal. I mean me. Thank you. If it's me, I appreciate that. I'll try and. But yeah, I think you too, Geoff. And again, the Armchair Fantasy Show on Wednesdays. I guess nothing this Wednesday, but look for that in seasons. And speaking DFS, the DFS show Friday nights. I know that's always my favorite source for DFS stuff. DraftKings lineups. I always sometimes I'm building my lineups as I'm watching the show Friday, because that's where I want to get the good advice to how to start off and
100%.
Get those key players.
My 2 co-hosts are brilliant DFS minds, and I literally I will have the show, and then when we're done with the show, I'll put it out on audio, and then I will go back and watch or listen to the audio while building my lineups. Listening to Gerson, who just commented there, he's one of my co-hosts, and Tim Strobel's the other one. We have a lot of fun, but we also give very good advice. So definitely tune in there on Friday nights.
Yeah, for sure. Had a lot of fun here. So thank you, Geoff, for bestowing all your knowledge and again the origins of Going for Two and yeah, because you're the engine that really makes it tick, the heart of us all, and we follow your lead and again. I appreciate that you chose me to host press coverage. This is a super fun experience this off season. Monday nights converting back to I guess we're calling it 2-point conversion. I'm not sure what we settled on a name yet, but Monday night pregame show. Monday night kickoff. I can't remember. That might be the Sunday show.
The 2-point conversion pregame show. I think we'll go.
Okay, we did keep kind of
you had the super the score was on Sunday, so y'all are the point after on Monday.
Yeah, 2-point conversion, right? Yeah, you go. Yeah, so I think keeping that Gladys what she had in the off season alternating Mondays. We're keeping that 2-point conversion name Going for Two. We can't say it too much after all, but yeah. So check that out. Monday nights we'll be doing. Basically, it'll be a 50-50 split between dealing with player injuries and the fallout and the fantasy takeaways from injuries, who to add, the outlook for the injured players themselves, and then also prop bets for the Monday night games through Thrive, a sponsor at Going for Two. So just appreciate that partnership and want to help out. So we're going to have some fun talking some props on those Monday night games. So that'll be a fun experience for sure. I know this week, Dynasty Gambit will also be celebrating the final off-season episode of Dynasty Gambit as that converts to, again, Thursday night pregame show. Hamid will continue to host that well. So much going on the Going for Two Live network. So appreciate, Geoff, you spending your time with us here, and appreciate all the listeners who spend time watching. Any final words for everyone here?
No, that's it, guys. Just tune in. Like I said, we have a show every single night of the season. I mean, Saturdays and Sundays too. We have a Sunday morning show, a Sunday late night value DFS show. We've got a brand new show starting on Fridays before my show called the Fantasy Cheat Sheet, which a couple of new guys will be hosting that. So yeah, we've got some great things going on, guys. Definitely check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, wherever you watch your stuff at, we're there.
All right, and to everyone who's watched not only this episode, but all the episodes of press coverage this offseason, I titled it episode 15 for the live people. I'm pretty sure this is episode 16, so all 60 episodes have been great success. So really appreciate that. On behalf of Geoff and everyone at Going for Two, my name is Kyle Senra, and this was Press Coverage.